there are worrying signs, from the both sides. Whoever loses, we may end up seeing some uprisings, some protests, which may get crushed by the security forces. So there's a danger waiting to happen, and we're all hoping that we'll find a way to avoid that.
And we've got to go back to Turkey because voters are heading to the polls to select their president. Round 2, and Recep Tayyip Erdogan is the favourite to win. He's already been in power for 20 years, although he's blamed for many of the problems Turkey is facing. However, it seems likely he'll be keeping his job. Why is that? And what do the diaspora make of it? We've got a large Turkish diaspora here in the UK. Ibrahim Dogus is the director of the Centre for Turkey Studies. He's based in London. Ibrahim, should I be saying Turkey or Turkiye? I keep hearing that Turkiye these days. What should I say?
The government has rebranded the country's name from Turkey to Türkiye, which means Turkish, which means Türkiye, Turkey in Turkish. Yep. So government wants to use Türkiye, and I think people are beginning more and more to use the word Türkiye instead of Turkey now.
Is this more of a rebrand because it's yet again Erdogan's nationalism? Is it more substance than just style?
It's more about his sort of nationalism and him trying to convince to the country that he has power to make any changes necessary to keep the country growing and strong. That's his way of showing his power.
All right. Well, in the last hour, we spoke to a professor of politics in Turkey and also the correspondent from the independent newspaper who is also there. And we discussed what the big issues were for people living in Turkey. But I'm just wondering about the Turkish diaspora. It's very strong here in the UK, very solid and, energetic part of our multicultural, multi-ethnic UK. What do you think most of them want to see happen? Who do they support on the whole?
Yeah, I mean, the Turkish and Kurdish people of Turkey who are residents and are now dual nationals in Britain, they've been here for the past 30 plus years. They are all into small businesses. You wouldn't be surprised to see hairdressers, kebab shops, restaurants, takeaways, many other businesses owned and managed by these communities. The majority of people from Turkey in UK are of Kurdish origin.
Yes.
So you wouldn't be surprised to see 80% of them voting for the opposition candidate. So at the last 2 weeks ago at the parliamentary election, 80% voted for the pro-Kurdish parties and they voted for the opposition candidate for the president. So AK Party and President Erdogan's base of support in UK is quite weak. So the diaspora in UK is predominantly interested in seeing a new dawn tomorrow. They want to see the opposition candidate winning against President Erdogan.
Why are they so hostile to Erdogan, and why do they invest much more hope in Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu?
Most people have arrived into UK as political refugees. Majority of them came before President Erdogan took over 20 years ago. They came after the military coup in 1980s, and they settled in the UK. You may remember thousands of villages were destroyed by the Turkish army. All of the inhabitants of those villages were of Kurdish origin. Most have moved into bigger cities in Turkey, but millions have moved out of Turkey and they become refugees in countries like Britain, Germany, France, and other European countries. So they want to see a change in the country. They want to see Turkey becoming more democratic rather than more authoritarian. And President Erdogan's first 10 years in power was quite positive. Majority of public did actually back him, and they wanted to see further changes, further reforms in the country. And that was what was promised by President Erdogan in the first 10 years. And he did try to change the country. He did end military's dominance in politics and the civil society. But he didn't replace that with a democratic accountability where citizens become the powerful figures in the country. Rather, he managed to sort of consolidate his own power through his own political movement by controlling the majority of institutions, including the mass media. So now, again, it wouldn't surprise you to hear that more than 80-90% of the mass media in the country is controlled by President Erdogan and his supporters. So these are all negative. They are seen as negative things by the majority of public in diaspora, especially in Britain. And the country is very much polarized. You've got 50% of the country almost, blindly loyal to President Erdogan. And then you've got other 50% who are blindly loyal to opposition. So there hasn't been much shift from the political positioning by the people who are supporting President Erdogan or by the people who are supporting the opposition. So we're seeing polarization getting worse, and tonight's result would hopefully mean some sort of a reconciliation where both sides are able to come together for a better country to live side by side in peace and harmony. There are worrying signs, from the both sides. Whoever loses, we may end up seeing some uprisings, some protests, which may get crushed by the security forces. So there's a danger waiting to happen, and we're all hoping that we'll find a way to avoid that.
I mean, 25% of the Kurdish population are between, I think, of the voters are between 18 and 29. So it's a young, dynamic, energetic country. And of course, a significant percentage of those will be of Kurdish origin. And some of them will be here in this country. I mean, how much hope do people have? And how much desire is there to go back and try and invest some of this entrepreneurial spirit that we see here in the UK in Turkey?
About 10 years ago, there was a bigger number of young people believing that Turkey is offering, there are more opportunities in Turkey, there are better sort of chances for them to succeed in business, in life, in politics, whatever. So there was a movement, there were people going back 10 years ago. But most of those who went back decided to come back because things have not worked out the way they wanted to. Their way of life, their desires have not been, they've not happened. The government and the sort of the pressure, the oppression that those people have seen from the government circles have escalated in the last 10 years. So people are no longer at this juncture seem to be interested in going back and doing much in the country. So now the economy is in a big trouble. The value of Turkish lira is going down constantly. The minimum wage in the country used to be equal to £1,000 a month. Now it's less than £400 a month in past 10 years. So the inflation, official figures are over 80%, but food inflation is over 100%. So it's very difficult for people to find a decent living standard in the country. So I do not expect any other sort of people who are living in diaspora to consider going back at this stage. But what's key is whoever wins tonight, hopefully, will stop and think, and rather than carrying on with similar policies which have created the current problems in the country, they would look back and say, where we have made these mistakes, how do we go back to our opposition? How do we actually embrace differences and try to find a new way to manage the country where all our citizens, no matter what their ethnicity, what their gender preferences, whatever they want to, however they want to live, that they find a way to live together in peace and harmony.
And when it comes to foreign policy, both President Erdogan and Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu have very different visions for where Turkey should go. I mean, Erdogan likes this idea that it's a power broker. Sometimes it's hostile to the West and closer to the East, and some other times, well, you remember, I'm a NATO member, whereas Kılıçdaroğlu wants to be much closer to the West, doesn't he? Where do you think most Turks are?
I mean, again, the country is so polarized, 50% will just follow what President Erdogan claims is best for the country. So therefore, they would be very happy to see a closer relationship with Russia rather than NATO allies. Then the other 50%, which who are backing Kılıçdaroğlu and the opposition political parties, they want to see a closer relationship with the European Union, with Western countries. That's where Turkey used to be, and now that's it's changed. So now, I mean, President Erdogan's foreign policy is more about expanding its influence in Middle East. He wouldn't shy away from sending troops into Syria. He wouldn't shy away from sending troops into Libya. He wouldn't stop at sending troops to support Azerbaijan against Armenia. So he would be quite expansionist in a way to increase his influence. But Kılıçdaroğlu will be much closer to NATO policies. He would probably withdraw the Turkish forces outside Turkey, and he would be looking into a better relationship with NATO and NATO allies, where they can follow the similar policies together.
All right, Ibrahim Dogus, Director of the Center for Turkey Studies, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your perspective on what's happening in Turkey.